Nothong Tishmal Turner. Hello to all of you. My name is Tishmal Turner, and I'm currently serving as the Vice Chair of the Rincon Band of Luiseño Indians. I'm coming up at the end of my first term, and I'm actually in election season. I'm an elected official. And I would like to begin by recognizing the ancestral homelands of the Tongva Gabrielano people. And in our, that is appropriate for us to do that, and when we're out working with our tribal communities and speaking, to recognize the homelands that we are on. And so these are the indigenous homelands of the Tongva and Gabrielano people, and it's an honor for me to be here. I have served the last 20 years working in tribal communities, not only as vice chair, but as a resource coordinator for Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, which is it's a nonprofit organization. It's a collaborative organization that services now 20 tribes in the Southern California area. And I also have served as the tribal liaison. I was the first appointed tribal liaison for the last 11 years in the California State University higher education system. And working in that role, I'd had the opportunity to bridge higher education institution in California with the surrounding tribal communities, and working underneath a CSU president. And I have been the only one in that role for about 10 years. So Chico State has recently appointed a tribal liaison. But it's been interesting to really work and have feet in both world of higher academia, people that are studying American Indians, as well as people that need the resources to help them learn more about their communities and collect data. And it's always, I always said, you know, even though I could be at the university or in the tribal community, that I will forever be a Rincon Band of Luiseño Indian tribal member. So, you know, we work in our tribal communities. It's very, very important to build relationships and the trust. And I want my community to know that I have their best interest. And I think when you're out working with our communities and you work with American Indians, that, you know, they are trying to work their best to protect and build trusting relationships for their communities. There are over 100 tribes. How many is everybody in here from California? Is that? Okay. There are over 100 tribes in the state of California, and they range all the way from the Oregon border to the Mexico border and as far east as Arizona and Nevada. And when you look at those tribes, the diverse is not every single one of those tribes has their own language, culture, traditions, and government structures. Their sovereignty looks different. How they exercise sovereignty is different on every one of those reservations. And you know, it's really important to understand that, because if you go to even in San Diego County, we're the largest number of any reservations in any county in the United States, and many people don't know that. And sometimes people just have this assumption that how many people have been to a reservation? How many people, what took you there? I just raise your hands, and this is all good. We're all here, we're all friends. How many have been there because you went to the casino? Okay.
The rest are lying.
Well, you know, a lot of people, you know, they try to relate to us because they say, oh yeah, I've been to a reservation because I went to a casino. Well, you know, it's less than half of the tribes in the state of California have a casino. And, you know, you look at the diversity, you know, even in San Diego County, there are some that have 5 acres of land. There are some that have, you know, 50,000 acres of land. So, and some have really held on to their culture, you know, those ones that have been further removed and more isolated, you know, have maybe, and a lot of us now, like when I introduced myself a couple years ago, I couldn't do that. We are in an era of reclamation of our language on my own reservation. And, you know, and reviving some of our culture. And, you know, I think really looking at being good stewards, establishing relationships with tribal communities is really important. I think, if you have somebody that you're already working with, that you can help build that relationship and champion your relationship with them. And also don't reinvent the wheel. A lot of times our communities have we have these nonprofit organizations like Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association that already is devoted, and one of their goals is for social economic development and health and wellness. So start with some organizations, and there's 3 Tribal Chairmen's Associations in the state of California. There is the Northern, Central, and Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. If you can reach out to those tribal communities and ask to, promote your programs, or if they ask you to come promote your program, go, show up. I think, sometimes I remember being, working at Cal State San Marcos, and there's this area, it's called San Isabel, and you have to go on this really windy road in San Diego, right? We call it a really windy road, and it was raining, and I was the only person that showed up that day because it was raining and it was too far. And I think, show up, build these relationships. Often our programs, people are busy from 9 to 5, so there might be weekends and evenings, so really build that relationship, show up. I think, a lot of times we want to have somebody that has a relatable experience. So when you are hiring people to work in your programs with this specific population, you may want to, see if they are familiar with that population. We want to make sure we're doing a search for a president at Cal State San Marcos, and we have a meeting on Friday, and I'm inviting our community members to come and say, we really want to keep our Native Advisory Council. We really want to make sure that we continue this road of success working with tribal communities. And it is because you have a person like me that is from a local tribal community. And I have similar experiences with the people that we're serving. I grew up on a reservation. I know that, I know what it feels like to drive that hour and a half when it's raining. So I think those are some things to think about. I think, if the relationship is not genuine and you're not able to relate to people, be honest about that, because we want to teach people about our communities. We're very proud of our tribal communities. And, I'd be more than willing to host a group down to our reservation. We do it often, and we invite our state legislators to come down. We'll put you on a bus, and we will take you a tour of our reservation. And we will show you some things that we are working on. We will show you things that, the old pictures. We are really happy. We just opened up a government center this last month that is 43,000 square feet. I grew up in a tribal hall. Some of my very early memories that this tribal hall had wood floors. The bathrooms were outside in another building, and the windows were not like glass windows. They were these windows that was a piece of plywood that they propped up, and they put a 2x4 under, or a 4x4, and it was chicken wire was the screen. So I mean, tribes have come a long ways. We are really diverse. We want to show you our success, and we have an Indian health clinic down in Rincon that is really beautiful. That's most of the tribal communities belong to a centralized health consortium. So the consortium that's on my reservation, it's Indian Health Clinic. There are 9 reservations that are serviced by that one clinic. So places like that are good to start. They may already have some types of programs like the ones that you're trying to offer in there, already housed there. So don't reinvent the wheel. I think there are a lot of people too wear different hats in our community, so keep that in mind. Help build capacity with the people that do have interest. And I think I want to say too that, what else did I want wanted to add. I think that also another tip, that be realistic of goals working with tribal communities. You know, when you guys are establishing, I think listen to the tribe. They know when people live or have 5 hats, they know what their timeline. They might tell you yes because they really want to work with you and they want to support the program, but be realistic about timelines and hold each other accountable, I think, about those. So those are some of my things that I've learned in my last 20 years of working in tribal communities. And Narinda and Jen have my contact information, and I'd be happy to be a further asset to all of you if you need anything. So thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Councilwoman Turner. I'm still getting used to that because we've known each other for a long time and worked with each other for a long time. Mi machachi no Madam Geisler, no noinai bayom gwichim achish and Lovit for your words. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Geisler. I'm a citizen of the La Jolla Band of Liseño Indians. With me today, I actually have my family. You probably see me chasing my kids around the hallway. I have my wife in the back. So if you see them, say hi. If you see my little social butterfly wandering around, say hi to her too. I also have our former chairwoman in the room, Levon Peck, in the back. Levon, say hi. Levon is also my mother. So I think one thing I'm gonna point out real quick is Indian country is small. When I look across this table, I'm laughing. I haven't seen Phil in years, and I know we know each other. We couldn't figure out exactly from when or where. Susan, we've worked with on compact legislation with the California Nations Indian Gaming Association. Tishmal and I have worked on philanthropic events, disaster recovery elements. Narinder and I have worked together on the tobacco components across the state over the last few years. So the point is that a lot of us know each other and the network is actually really small. And so I guess I wanted to just point out a couple things. When you're looking to engage Indian country, it's important to make sure that you look at garnering relationships that are in existence. You know, you heard don't recreate the wheel. The wheel's already there. The networks, the associations, the relationships are pretty well established, and people seem to know each other up and down the state when it comes down to the way things function. I also want to encourage you, and this sounds offensive, I don't mean it to be. That probably is never a good way to start, right? You really want to look for people, if you're building your capacity with your programs or your departments, that are from the community. And that's I guess a polite way of saying some of these things, but the reality is that Indian country holds a unique political relationship with the federal government and the state government and the localities. And sometimes people try to put that into a racial space, and the relationship at its fundamental base is governmental, and there's a governance structure behind that. And so it's important to understand that if you're going to try to engage in Indian country, that you have people that come from that community and know that community. Now, with that being said, I'm clearly not the darkest individual in the room or from my community. My dad is very German. But what I will say is that my dad lives and understands the community. And so, you know, poor dad, I didn't even talk to him about this, but I'm going to talk about him for 5 seconds. Because it's important to understand how you engage Indian country if you're not native, and how you can try to relate or not relate, and what can get you in hot water. So I wanted to open with a couple of things. First off, there's no funny native joke or Indian joke, and yes, those words can be interchangeable depending on what part of the country you're in, quite frankly. Some are offended, some aren't, if you're not native, okay? So if you walk into a meeting, right, these guys are laughing because it's true. If you walk into a meeting and you want to start talking about your heritage of a great-grandmother from maybe someplace in Oklahoma that was a princess, that is not a good way to start a conversation, okay? You're better off coming in and talking about the project or the scope or what your goals are. But with that, I'm also going to say you need to be open to what it is that they're wanting to share with you and how that fits within their governance structure. My community, we're a non-gaming tribe. We have a couple of enterprises. We built a zip line. We have a campground that turns into Woodstock just about every other weekend. It's not a small thing. and we have a gas station. We're getting ready to open up a small little, I call it slot alley. We're going to open, 30 slot machines in a gas station, kind of like what you see driving through Nevada, right? But I think one of the things that you got to keep in mind, especially from the tobacco space, is that these enterprises where tobacco use is being permitted is a subsidy for tax revenue. I have 200 homes on my reservation, right? I spent a decade in tribal leadership. I tell people I'm a tribal leader in recovery, and I probably shouldn't joke about that in this room. But what I really mean is I spent a decade serving my community as an elected official, dealing with public health issues. I was the tribal delegate on behalf of California to the Center for Disease Control, and I worked with the director directly. And it was always hard to get people to understand that these policies that are there for the better public health of the community are also being weighed on a political level with the tribes and their enterprises, because there isn't another form of tax revenue, right? So how many of you all think Native people are rich, right? This is one of those kind of jokes that we hear every now and then. Some of us get it in the airport regularly. If we're wearing anything that looks Native, hey, you're one of those Natives, you get a check. We don't all get checks, some do. The way I would equate that is, imagine starting a business with 500 to 1,000 of your family members, figuring out how you didn't kill each other in the process, borrowing close to $500 million to $1 billion, paying off that debt, paying a management company because you didn't know how to operate that in the beginning, right? So they have these enterprises, they have these huge loans that are sitting out there, and then the revenue that comes out of that is going into things that pay for other government services, health facilities, fire service, roads. I mean, elder care, it just goes on and on and on and on and on down the list. So, and I think that's something that Narinder has probably seen in her prior work leading up to this, is that you really have to be delicate in the way that you're approaching some of these concepts, or the way that you want to integrate tobacco use or regulation with tribes, because it's not always going to be welcome the way that you might think it should fit. And they're balancing those other things. Some other things that I guess I wanted to point out was that you're dealing with things from not only from a policy standpoint and from an enterprise standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. And if you're going to be successful, and the theme of this is how do you relate to the communities. In my day work, I have to go around and try to do this with 573 federally recognized tribes. Okay, that's what I do every day. That task is daunting, and the first thing that I have learned, I learned working in Indian country was humility. Despite my funny jokes, you guys all laugh, thank you. You really do have to humble yourself walking in. When you've worked with one tribe, you've worked with one tribe. And we're neighbors. We actually share a boundary. And the way we function, the dialect, the culture, the interactions are very different, right? We all talk. We actually have families, we share families across the boundaries between our distinct reservations and our sovereign borders. But the bottom line is, one tribe is, you've worked with one tribe. So how many of you have ever sent an email or a flyer out to Indian country and you scratched your head going, I never got anything back? Anybody? I should have just stopped with, how many of you ever sent a flyer to Indian country? Yeah. And then what was the success rate, right? Vice Chairwoman Turner, God, I'm still trying to get used to that. Vice Chairwoman Turner, she pointed out an example of driving through the mud an hour and a half, on windy roads. The reality is half the tribes in this state don't even have broadband access, right? So you think you sent an email off or some letter, and it went to 5 people's desks, and it probably didn't even get to the right person, because Indian country is still stretched thin. Even when you have these mega enterprises, there are still people wearing 15 hats. During the time that I was serving as an elected official for my own tribe, I managed roads, disaster recovery, community planning, and then I also oversaw the compact negotiations for gaming and things like that. It's a weird space that is unique. I remember coming home from Washington, D.C., we had just met Vice President Biden on a 45-year water settlement issue, and I got home, landed off the plane, and we were getting phone calls because the dogs were chasing kids home from the bus. Right? I mean, that's a day in the life of, well, now Tishmal, a day in the life of the types of things that you're dealing with when you're working in Indian country. So in terms of managing the expectations, I think that's a great recommendation, because you need to keep in perspective what's relative to the leadership and the community that you're trying to work within. And then I guess the last thing I'll leave you with, because Susan's going to have a hard one picking up the tail end of this. What I want to leave you with is look for your community champions, right? I kind of said it earlier, look for people that come from within the community, but the networks and the people that are out there, the champions stand out like, I hate to say like a sore thumb, but they're bright and shining. You can't miss who they are. And there are tons of people across Indian country that are passionate, especially about anything related to prevention for public health related items, whether it's alcohol or tobacco or drugs. Those champions are there, and there's networks that are strong. If you're trying to get in those doors, walk out, drive out, have a little humility. Don't be afraid to go to the tribal administration building and say, I've been trying to get a hold of somebody. I just want to introduce myself. Is there somebody here I can talk to about tobacco? Don't be afraid to do that. Matter of fact, that's a lot more welcome than a cold call or an email. Most of the cultures that I've come across in this state, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the Miwok up north or the Kumeyaay down south, they don't trust you until they see you. Okay. Another thing that we do, if a Native person offers you a meal, you better take it. I don't, in my tribe, I won't speak for everybody. In my tribe, we don't trust people that we can't sit down and watch them chew. Okay. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's a custom and a tradition for tribes to want to feed you if you show up, and it's an insult if you don't take it. And really, what they're doing is it's a litmus test, right? So keep in mind, they don't, last piece, I walk around daily trying to explain broadband. How many of you guys fully understand network engineering, architecture of broadband, how your cell phone works, right? Guess what? Most of the people I meet with don't either. So when they're looking at me and they're evaluating what I'm saying, they're evaluating me. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. I could be talking about the stars. They're just seeing if I'm full of it. So keep that in mind, that the face-to-face interaction that you have with tribes is really important because they're really trying to read you as a person. So just be yourself. Don't try to relate to things that you can't relate to. Talk to what you know, and be confident when you go in and you do those things. So I'll transition over. Go.
Boy, those two are hard to follow. Both these, if you do that, have a good afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow. I do want to follow up on one of the things, but I'll get into that later. My name's Phil Bush. I'm the chairman of Nevada, California Indian Housing Association. Been the chairman since 1991 or so, however long that's been. It's been quite a while. It feels like a lifetime appointment. But when we set out, however many years ago when the organization was formed, it was primarily to just try to get housing, any type of housing assistance. And just through evolution and time, we changed our charter, changed quite a few things up, and now we're a joint powers organization. And a joint powers organization, it's the tribes themselves join. It's every tribe is a member. It's ran by tribes. We look for tribal leadership. We look for housing authority professionals, and those are the actual members. We promote safe and decent and affordable housing for Indian people, not only in California, but Nevada as well. The advice that they're giving is fantastic advice. When Nevada Cal first got put together, we were primarily looking for ways to obtain housing. And then we started figuring it out. Well, now we're getting housing. I mean, you got to remember, this is quite a few years ago. Now we're getting housing. Now how do we make well communities? Come housing comes a bunch of problems. Tobacco is just one of the problems. But we do that with training and education. So I'm going to tell you a couple of different stories, because networking and partnershiping, these work. And if you can get in the door, exactly what Adam was talking about, and the vice chairwoman, there's a way to do it very respectfully, but you got to be persistent as well. And just an example, well, just to let you know, Adam, I do get a check.
Lucky.
It's only once a year and it's pretty small. But it was quite a few years ago that Timashasha Shoshone Tribe in Death Valley needed some housing assistance. And so my wife and I, which is sitting here, Grace Bush, this is just an example, you know, and of course, I'm a native, so I get Indian preference. You know, us Indians, we get a lot of different things because we're within our own communities. So we put in a proposal and we go down, and we didn't go down there. There's four other proposers. So they said, we want to interview you. Great. So how long does it take? From my house to Death Valley was 12 hours. It was the middle of September. So it was 121 degrees. And where I live about a mile high. It's about 5,000 foot. And, you know, if we hit 80, 90, we think it's a heat wave. So here we go. And they said, we got to see you. So Grace and I drove down there. We get all the way down there. First thing in the morning, they want to meet us. 8 o'clock. Okay, we're at the tribal office, 8 o'clock in the morning. Tribal chairwoman says, it's such a nice day outside, which is 119, 120. Let's move it outside. You know, my eyes just went, what? And we moved outside. And then it was our turn on the agenda. And so Mr. Bush, get up, and we said, okay, we're ready to answer any questions, you know, what do you need to know? They said, you're hired, have a good day. But it was that test that Adam was just talking about. It was that test on whether or not we were going to meet him face to face. They want to see you. They want to meet you. They want to, I don't know how many times as chairman of Nevada Cal, I send out to the association members, hey, who's going to the meeting? You know how many responses I get? Hey, we really need policymakers and tribal leaders at this meeting. You know what we get? But do they all show up to the meeting? They're there. And so it's just something that we got used to. And it's something that we got really used to. But at any rate, Death Valley, hey, now they got a nice community center and we did some homes for them down there. It actually turned out pretty good. But they just wanted to see the face-to-face, the interaction. They wanted to see who we were. So I guess what I'm saying is better to knock on the door than email or call. It really is. They want that connection. They want to see you. There's one more quick example I want to use. As Nevada Cal keeps evolving, and we're not only looking at affordable housing, dealing with the federal government, dealing with the state government, looking at all these laws and regulatory requirements, you know, we're faced with, in housing-wise, quite a few different obstacles. One, of course, is the meth epidemic. And the more we learned about that, the worse it was getting. In fact, it was one of those we didn't want to know about because of what it's bringing. Tobacco, secondhand smoke. The list goes on and on and on. Mold, black mold, and whatnot. So one day, about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we had a nice person from California Clean Air Project contact us and say, what are you guys all about? Well, we promote safe and decent sanitary housing for Indian people. So our friend showed up. Very quiet, very respectful. And then really nothing, had some handouts. They became an associate member. So a year goes by, and I remember getting an email, or can we do a survey? And it's like, oh, you know how many surveys Indians go through? And that's no lie. I mean, we're poked and prodded. We're surveyed constantly. And it's really? What do you need to know? Do we smoke? Yeah, we smoke. Yeah, do we have these problems? Of course we do. But through very, very respectful persistence, it's starting to pay off. Because now we don't look at California Clean Air Project as an associate member. We look at them as a partner. And it's big. And how it's big is because finally, just after time, with the persistence, the right tribal leaders, the right policymakers are sitting in our meetings, and the message gets home. We have right now, and it surprised the heck out of me, and I'll be honest, because it did, we have one of the tribes in Northern California built a multifamily complex, and it's smoke-free. You can't smoke within 25 foot of that building. And I didn't think that I'd ever see that. We see it in the casinos, we see it in the hotels. I didn't think we'd see it in Indian housing. I really didn't. Tribes don't have to comply with state law. And when public housing switches to no smoking in their public housing units, tribes are exempt from that. So it was just with education and persistence and having the right people in the right room at the right time to where all of a sudden a new project comes up and they're not only talked about secondhand smoke, residual effects, but meth and everything that goes with it. So the entire property is drug-free and smoke-free. And there is a difference between cultural tobacco and personal use tobacco. The project was blessed, did everything culturally right. And we told these families, and this is serious stuff as far as we're concerned now, because we're the managers, that we test. We test for meth, marijuana, nicotine. We test for anything. And the consequences, and some of the stuff that I was hearing in the breakout sessions this morning, and the first one is tougher laws, tougher policies, tougher things. And one person asked, how do you enforce in multifamily housing? You evict. That's what we do. But in all honesty, I never thought I'd see the day that we saw in tribal housing, Indian housing, an entire complex that is smoke-free. I gotta hand it to it. And it's because of persistence, respectfulness, and educating. When we'd sit down, she never missed a meeting in I don't know how long, but she's always there. And I tell you, we did let her take a survey, but she bribed us. Should I tell them how? They gave anybody that completed the survey got a Starbucks card. And it worked. I filled out 3. That's not true, but I tried to, and so, oh, that's funny. But networking to me is probably just like what we're doing right here. This is to me what it's about. If you really want to get the message home, it's networking and partnerships and understanding who you're trying to network and partnership with. And it's when I was asked to be on this panel, I said, what? I'm a smoker. You want me to sit up here on a panel and talk about smoke-free, secondhand smoke and whatnot? Of course. You understand it. You understand the part that pertains to housing and healthy communities and what's being implemented. And it does work. And the only way it worked was persistence, the networking, and the partnership. And it was done in a very respectful way. So if you ever want to know on how it's really done and see how these partnerships work, you can ask one person right here. She's the one that actually did it. She came to us and knocked on our door. And I got to say, I would have never thought. Since that tribe has done that, now we have other tribes that have actually stepped up and they're already talking to us. How'd you guys do that? We want to make this multifamily complex over here smoke-free.
It actually worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
And so they want to know, how does this happen? And we said, well, the first thing we had to do was meet with the community. We met with the community members. We sat down with them. It's an elder project. We sat down with them and said, hey, what do you guys think if we make this smoke-free? And half the people said, well, we don't smoke. The other half said, well, we do smoke, but I should quit. Well, what kind of boost do you need to help you quit? I've been smoking for 50 years. It's not going to happen. So would you consider smoking outside or in a designated area? And it was, well, we know we should, but probably not. And they're just being honest. And so what that particular board's looking at is not to say we're going to go in there cold turkey, you can't smoke here anymore. It's as the units turn over, just through attrition, that tribe is actually putting in place right now. We're going to go in, we clean it, we test it. We show baseline testing to the new tenant that shows there's nothing in this unit. It's 100% clean, and just through attrition, and that's how they're going to get rid of them. Or not the tenants, that came out wrong. Sorry. Oh my gosh.
That was good though.
Yeah. I didn't mean that the way that came out. I really meant on how we're just going to eventually get that whole community in the rental housing program to be, it's going to be smoke free. And there's another tribe further south from them that they're actually talking about it. And one of this person sits on the council, and we're in a council meeting, and this was just actually about a week and a half ago. Well, my mom smokes, and she's a council member, but we know she shouldn't. And it's a multifamily project. Well, we'll look at the effect on the neighbor. Well, there's no effect. We said, yeah, actually, we think there is an effect. And this is one more quick example, and then I'll turn it over to Susan. This same project that I'm talking about, which now that tribe's considering to make it smoke-free, about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, one of the elders, one of the neighbors was really complaining about permeating smoke coming through the walls of the ductwork or something, and it was affecting them. And so we contacted our friends at California Clean Air Project. They actually came in and did testing for us. Well, we tested 3 or 4 days, 5 days, I can't remember, whatever it was. It wasn't high levels, but it spiked at 2 o'clock every day for some reason, and we don't know why. It was weird, we couldn't figure it out. Okay, it's not coming through, but it spiked. And what that showed us, and talking with the professionals that really know, because you don't know how to test for cigarette smoke and how it comes through walls and whatnot, said we just need more testing. And then so the tribe said, no, I don't think we need testing. And that's what they're talking about now, and been talking about it. What they're thinking about is just making it smoke free, so we don't have the problem. And that's a big deal. But those same tribal leaders, and some of them are board of commissioners that sit on the Housing Authority Board, showed up to our meetings, showed up when we had California Clean Air Project, showed up when our partners were in the room, listened, and then they took the information back. That was a big deal. And then they called me, and then you know who I call? Actually, don't call her, I email her, because I do respond to emails once in a while. So with that, that's all I wanted to say. I think this is a great opportunity to network. This is one heck of a panel. Like I said, I can't even believe that I was invited to sit with these guys, but thank you.
This is a hard one to follow up on, but first of all, I want to thank all of you for showing up. I think it shows a lot of your commitment. This is a hard issue, and it's a hard group of individuals to approach and to understand, and it takes time. I think I'm the only one that's not a native, so I am kind of proof that it can be done. I started working with CNIGA 20 years ago. I thought I knew something about tribes. In my first week, realized I knew nothing. Everything we learned in school was about Plains Indians, nothing about California Indians, but I learned very quickly. And what I learned is to listen to the experts. They know their tribe the best. And if you approach them in a respectful, open-minded way, they will welcome you. It takes time. The comments of showing up, I think it's going to take more than one meeting, especially with this topic. It's a hard one to get themselves around, but a lot of it is trust. There's a history of outsiders coming onto tribal reservations and saying, trust us, we know it's best for you. And we know how that worked out for tribes, not so great. So they are survivors, and they learned how to protect themselves and to keep those people that don't have the best interest of the tribe at bay, and they're very good at doing it. So if for some reason they don't trust you or they don't think, they'll make you run around. They might schedule a meeting and cancel it. but they're going to see if you'll reschedule. Canceling one meeting, they're busy. They wear multiple hats. That sometimes happens, but sometimes it might be a test. And so you have to swallow that pride and say, okay, I will drive that hour and a half again and continue at it. It is possible, and it is, as a non-native, okay to work in this industry and to be trusted. But you have to show that respect and the willingness to learn about them. Again, each tribe is unique and different, but learning about that and having the ability to enter that world is fulfilling, and you'll learn just amazing things that you never thought possible, while also talking to them about how you can help their community. I think Phil tapped on this, but Narinder is your single best asset here. She has done such an amazing job at reaching out to tribes in a respectful but knowledgeable way. I remember when she joined CNIGA as an associate member as well, and I loved her but thought there is no way she will ever get in the door of these tribes. They're going to beat her down and break her spirit, and it's going to be, and she has prospered and hasn't missed a meeting, and our members love her. They welcome her with hugs, and she's part of their family now. It's amazing to watch, and it's a testament to your dedication to them. I'm going to choke up because she really has. We're a protective group. We protect each other, we protect the industry, and we protect the culture. And I say we because I feel part of it. And if you go to a meeting and never talk about a smoke-free, but just talk, that's a good meeting. Don't come out of it saying, God, we really didn't accomplish anything. I don't know where this is going. You made a connection with someone. And that will make more of a difference in the tribal community than a sales pitch. We hear sales pitches every day. Everyone has the perfect idea and the perfect product and the perfect everything. But getting to know the people and the need, and for example, housing, and what their issues are, that matters more than have I got an idea for you. Again, it's very easy to get discouraged, but hang in there because dedication matters to tribal people. They're dedicated to their communities. Not only are they elected leaders, but they're leading a community of family. And it's a very difficult, we all know our state politicians, and while their families may live in the state, they may not, but they're not they're not getting calls from their cousins saying, why did you do this? Why, and so they have to dance a very difficult tightrope between their constituents, their family, and the outside community. And so keeping that in mind, and then again, to touch on some of the comments, is the tribes are very, very different. We travel to all of the tribes. I'd like to say we've seen them all. We haven't. And again, I've been in this for 20 years and still haven't been to every reservation. I'm working on it. But this summer we went up north and visited the Yurok tribe. They have a teeny tiny little casino that makes them no money whatsoever. They actually lose money on their casino, but are happy to be able to provide 70 jobs to the locals. That tribe makes their money off timber because they're located up in the mountains of, it's like middle of nowhere, Northern California. But everyone thinks tribes are rich. They're all gaming tribes. Even gaming tribes aren't wealthy. There are a handful of them that are losing money on the casino, but they find it worth it because they're employing tribal members that have no other place to work, and members of the local community have somewhere to go. And again, they make their money off other things or grant programs or things like that. So approaching them and understanding that tribe, and they don't expect you to walk in and know. They're willing to teach you and tell you, just ask. That's the main thing, and be open to it, and don't rush them. It is a long process, and sometimes They'll invite you to sit down for a meal and they'll tell you about their families and you're thinking, we're getting nothing done here. You are. You truly are. And just be open, I think, is really the main thing, and utilize the resources that are out there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm April Raisler, and I'm the branch chief for the California Tobacco Control Program. And thank you for sharing. I was really interested to hear about the Joint Power Authority. I didn't know that there was such a thing in tribal land. Are there more joint power authorities than the housing one? Are there like around water or other issues, or more housing ones?
Yes,
I know
I know that.
How do I find out about them?
I think we're all torn on who's going to answer. The answer is yes. There are the Joint Powers Alliance or Joint Power Authorities. There's several that exist up and down the state through a variety of different mechanisms in a variety of different spaces. So, and you actually named a couple of them. There are a handful of tribes getting together on the water side. There's a handful. I mean, you name the topic. It's very localized depending on what everybody's getting together to try to accomplish with it. So yes, and that's actually a fairly new. When I say new, I think within the last 10 years there was some case law things that were, well, there was legal elements that prevented it in the past, and now that door is open. So I don't know a whole lot of tribes that are jumping into them right away, but I know that there are a handful out there, and there is a lot of ongoing dialogue right now. And it's funny you mentioned water. Water is actually one of the focal points of those.
Well, why I'm interested is because as a state agency, we actually have authority to directly fund joint power authorities where other, like nonprofit agencies, we can go out for competitive bids. So that's an attractive issue for us.
I'll just use my loud voice, but it's not a question, but I think it's part of the connection. So I am one of those Yurok tribal members in the extreme part of Northern California, and that tribal liaison at Chico State, that's my cousin Rachel.
What's your city again? Or town?
I'm based out of Arcata. Of course, my family's there in Klamath. So.
Thank you.
See how, that's an example of how small our communities are and how we know, because what if I said like, oh, that Rachel, you know.
My ears were open to that.
Well, I was going to ask him, do you know the Kinneys, right? I mean,
Of course.
And I think that's also, you know, when we are in our tribal communities, they want to figure out, you know, we have had a lot of historical trauma with working with government agencies. And I think the relationships are a lot better now, but, you know, they're still not where they should be. But I think, so understand that, and they may be a little bit skeptic of you, but, you know, by like showing up and being genuine and, you know, they might ask you like, why are you here? Or, you know, like, I mean, they will. And that's, when we even introduce ourselves, you know, like if I didn't know Adam, I might say like, what, Adam, like, who's your mom? Or, you know, oh, I know somebody from La Jolla. Do you know this Rodriguez's? And he'd say, well, actually, you know, that's my family. Who do you know? You know, so I think we're trying to build, that's our like kinship, and that's a way that we relate to each other. So don't take it or misunderstand it as being rude. It's just a way that we're trying to connect with you or and relate to you.
yeah, if you hear somebody say, where are you from? What they're really asking you, it's another litmus test. Are you native, and where are you identifying yourself from? So if I were to ask Tish, where are you from? Say I'm from Rincon. She wouldn't say I'm from Valley Center, California, located in San Diego County, right? And that's a soft way of asking without being direct. Are you a tribal member, right? And quite frankly, if you're not sure, that's always a question you can lead with. If you're conversating with folks and you're not quite sure, because we all don't look the way you probably think we should, or at least the stereotype in a lot of people's minds. So it's a very soft way to ask it for you to figure that out if that's something you want to ask somebody without being overly direct. Yeah.
I'm clearly not a tribal member, but I'm just going to say that thank you all for sharing your time with us this afternoon. For many of us who consider ourselves as outsiders, working very closely with tribes, one of the arguments that we've had is that about 30% of tribes live on tribal lands, and about 70% are landless. And so my question is, how do we reach out to tribes that, again, don't have land, and then they're living in the urban areas and they live among all of us? And so I'm just curious to know what would be the best strategy to reaching out to tribes that are not particularly living on reservations.
Yeah, I think that like the American Indian communities, whether you're on urban areas or non-urban areas, are organized. So if you go to like San Diego, they'll have, like the San Diego, there are groups in San Diego that regularly meet. They have children programming, they have prevention groups, they have after-school programs, they have health and human services. I know in Sacramento, they have like an Indian health center in Sacramento. So I think looking at some of those organizations, we've got, I think, in Orange County, there's the Southern California Indian Center. These groups have been for generations going and attending. I was in the Bay Area, they have their organizations. So, Google them. If you look for these groups, and even, like the after-school programs, like in LA County, they have a title, I think it's Title VI program now. So these parent advisory groups, they're out there, so.
You actually mentioned two different things in the way that you asked your question. So the first one was an important distinction. We identify the natives that live in, we call them, that live in town as urban, the urbans, right? So those may be tribal members, enrolled members from another tribe, maybe in California, maybe out of California, but they've gone to the urban centers, and that's what Tishmal is referring to there. The other element that you brought up was folks that live on their lands and off their lands, and there are some different distinctions when you're engaging tribal populations that you need to be mindful of, okay? There are federally recognized tribes. There's 570, I think it's 70, 3 and then it went to 9, but then there's some disputes going on. We'll leave that alone. Those federally recognized tribes are recognized by the federal government as sovereign nations, and they have that trust relationship with the federal government, okay? In addition to that, there are a number of tribes that still exist that, and let me do this other side. With the exception of Alaska, almost all of those federally recognized tribes have some sort of land base, okay? Whether it's 1 square mile or you're up in Washington, they have like 5 million acres, okay? And then Alaska is different, so we'll just put that in a different place. Then you also have, in different states, there are tribes that still exist that are not federally recognized, but the state recognizes them. So, and there's actually, in California, there's state legislation that recognizes what we call state recognized tribes. So they have no land base, and the federal government doesn't recognize them, and there's no federal funding that comes to them like the federally recognized tribes receive in some cases, completely underfunded, by the way. So keep that in mind too, as you're operating in California, that you may come across folks who say, well, I'm native, great, where's your community at? And they're like, well, we're a state recognized tribe. That might be a nuance to some of that. So I just wanted to you had two different things that were there that are legally and socially, I guess, different in the community too, that just want to draw attention to.
Can I follow up on that? So if they're state recognized and not federally recognized, are they sovereign nations?
No. Now, there are a number of tribes that are state recognized that are fighting for their federal recognition. And so, remember how a second ago I was bouncing around there used to be 569 federally recognized tribes. And in the last year there was 4 that were recognized out east. So there's actually a couple tribes that now have tribal homelands that have been reestablished and are recognized by the federal government. So just because they're state recognized today doesn't mean tomorrow that they couldn't be federally recognized.
And then just one last thing, every federally recognized tribe does have a tribal government in that functions. So there's a tribal office somewhere. They may not, there are a handful of California tribes that are still landless that are federally recognized,
you're right.
but they do have tribal offices. So again, the internet is your friend. Google them, and if not, our association has a list of at least our members, which gives you a good, or you can call us because we keep track of all of them. So there are ways of getting a hold of them, or call one of the larger tribes and just ask them, hey, I'm looking for a contact for tribal health in Orange County. They'll know who it is and they'll give you that information. So even just talking to the person who answers the phone at the tribal office, or say, you know, this is what I'm doing, who should I reach out to there? They'll help you.
I'll just add as well, most state recognized tribes have governance as well,
Right.
but their governance don't have the rights and the jurisdictional authority that federally recognized tribes have, but many of them have governance, whether because they're waiting to become federally recognized or just that's how they want to organize themselves.
Absolutely.
And I know there's one more hand in the back. We'll do that one, and then I have to let you go to get back to general session. So.
Do you know if there are ambassadors of sorts that have your skill set at the state level, most likely within, you know, the technical assistance tobacco regs, that can help open those doors to these tribes? So you're giving a lot of great advice, and I'm just curious, you know, if you already have connections, or if those connections exist, that people on the ground in tobacco control can reach out to first.
So thank you. That's a great segue into the fact that ETO was funded to be the American EU Coordinating Center for the state. Jen Geisler is in the back, who is married to Adam. Good. And so Jen is going to be our coordinator, and she is the perfect person for you to contact to get more information.
But their contract has not started yet. Please don't contact them yet.
January, let's say January. Thank you.